Mark and Emily had one simple dream: to leave their small town and build a new life together. But just as they were ready to start fresh, Emily vanished without a trace, taking every penny they had saved. What happened to her? And why did she disappear with all their money? Mark and Emily had lived in the same small town their entire lives, a place where everyone knew each other's names and stories. It was a quiet, unassuming community, the kind of town where life moved slowly and dreams often stayed just that: dreams. But Mark and Emily were different. They had plans, big plans. After years of watching friends and neighbors struggle to break free from the cycle of low-paying jobs and limited opportunities, they decided they would be the ones to change their fate. They were determined to leave the small town behind and build a new life somewhere bigger, somewhere full of promise and possibilities. For years, they had been quietly saving. Every dollar they could spare went into a joint savings account they nicknamed the New Beginning Fund. Their sacrifices were many. Instead of going out to dinner or enjoying weekend getaways like others, they stayed in, cooking simple meals and finding free ways to entertain themselves. Emily gave up her part-time hobbies and extra expenses, and Mark took on overtime shifts whenever he could. It wasn't easy. The long hours and constant tightening of their belts put a strain on their relationship, but they never let go of their shared vision. Every time the savings balance grew, so did their hope. It was a beacon, guiding them through tough times. Their friends often admired them for their discipline, even if some thought it was too much to give up. "You're missing out on life now," some would say. But Mark and Emily always smiled politely and stayed focused. They had a goal, and they were willing to pay the price. They talked about their future often, about moving to the city where Emily had a cousin who promised to help them get started. Mark dreamed of a better job, one that used his skills and paid well. Emily imagined finding a role where she could grow, maybe even go back to school someday. It was more than just money. It was hope, freedom, and the chance to live on their own terms. As the months passed, excitement built. They created lists of everything they would do once they arrived: apartments to see, jobs to apply for, places to explore. They marked a date on the calendar, the day they would leave their small town behind forever. Friends threw a small farewell party, wishing them luck and safe travels. It was a hopeful moment, full of promise and new beginnings. But beneath the surface, cracks began to appear. Emily's behavior started to change, though at first Mark thought it was just the stress of the upcoming move. She became quieter, more withdrawn. Sometimes she would disappear for hours without telling Mark where she was going or who she was with. When he asked, she gave vague answers or shrugged it off, saying she needed space to think. Mark noticed her growing secrecy but pushed the worries aside, reminding himself of all they had worked for. Maybe she was just overwhelmed. Moving to a new city was a huge step after all. Yet the late-night phone calls Emily took behind closed doors, the sudden spending of small amounts of cash from her personal account, and the unexplained absences began to weigh heavily on Mark's mind. He started to question if something was wrong, but he didn't want to admit it. The vision of their new life was so bright that it blinded him to the warning signs. Their last night in the small town was bittersweet. They packed their bags together, carefully counting the money they had saved. The fund was more than enough to get them started. They planned to withdraw it all on the day of their move, excited to finally have the freedom their years of hard work promised. The future seemed close enough to touch. But as Mark went to bed that night, he couldn't shake the uneasy feeling gnawing at him. Emily was already asleep, but something inside him whispered that nothing would ever be the same. The next morning would change everything, though he didn't yet know just how deeply. In that quiet moment before the dawn, the dream of a new life was still alive, but the shadows lurking beneath it were about to pull the couple into a mystery that neither of them could have predicted. The morning sun cast a soft glow over the small town, but the warmth it offered could not reach Mark's growing unease. When he woke up, the house was empty and silent. Emily was gone. Her bed was neatly made, her clothes folded in the closet, but she wasn't anywhere to be found. Mark's heart raced as he searched the rooms, hoping she might be outside or in the nearby park, but there was no sign of her. At first, Mark thought she might have stepped out for a quick errand or to visit a friend, but when he tried calling her phone, it went straight to voicemail. Then, the unsettling truth began to settle in. Emily had disappeared without a word. Panic gripped him as he dialed her closest friends and family members. No one had seen or heard from her. It was as if she had vanished into thin air. As the hours passed, Mark's fear deepened. He checked the security cameras they had installed at the front door. The footage showed Emily leaving the house early that morning, carrying a small suitcase, walking calmly down the street. There was no sign of struggle, no frantic behavior, just an orderly departure. She looked peaceful, almost deliberate. But why would she leave without telling him? And more importantly, where had she gone? The shock was only compounded when Mark checked their joint savings account online. The entire balance, the fund they had painstakingly built for their new life, was gone. Every last dollar had been withdrawn in multiple transactions over the past few days, the largest happening just hours before Emily left. His mind reeled. How could she take everything without a trace? It wasn't just money. It was their future. He immediately reported the disappearance to the police, but the lack of clear evidence complicated the investigation. There was no forced entry, no signs of foul play in the home, and Emily's recent calm demeanor suggested she left willingly. Detectives were skeptical about the possibility of a kidnapping or a violent crime. Instead, they began to suspect that Emily might have left by choice, running away with the money. The news spread quickly through the town, sparking whispers and speculation. Some people sided with Mark, unable to believe Emily would betray him. Others thought maybe she was escaping a secret life or debts they didn't know about. Mark felt isolated. Friends he had once trusted now looked at him with pity or suspicion. The community that had admired their determination now questioned everything. Mark refused to believe Emily could be capable of such a betrayal. He clung to memories of their shared dreams, the sacrifices they had made together. Yet the evidence was undeniable. The money was gone, and so was Emily. The reality sank in. His entire world was unraveling. With each passing day, the mystery deepened. Banks struggled to track the withdrawals, which were carefully spread out across several ATM machines in different towns. Emily seemed to have planned her disappearance with precision, leaving no easy trail. Mark hired private investigators to follow leads, desperate for any clue about where she might have gone or why. The investigators uncovered something unexpected. Emily had created a secret social media profile months earlier, using a fake name. The account was filled with pictures of exotic places, flights she had booked and canceled, and messages from strangers in far-off cities. It was a side of Emily Mark had never seen, a hidden world beyond the quiet town life. But despite these clues, no one could find her. The trail went cold. Emily had vanished completely. Mark's days were filled with endless waiting, hoping for a sign or a message. But none came. The woman he loved was somewhere out there. But why had she run? Was she in danger? Was she starting a new life? Or was there a darker reason behind her disappearance? Mark's hope began to waver, replaced by a growing fear that the story he thought he knew was only the beginning of something much more complicated and tragic. The dream of a fresh start had turned into a nightmare of loss and betrayal, and the answers he sought remained just beyond his reach. Weeks passed with no sign of Emily. Mark's life became a relentless search for answers that seemed to drift further away with every lead that vanished. The police had done all they could with the limited clues, and private investigators hired by Mark followed the faintest trails, hoping to catch a glimpse of her or uncover the reasons behind her disappearance. But every trail ran cold, every hope faded. The withdrawals from the savings account were carefully planned. Instead of taking one large sum, Emily had made dozens of small withdrawals at different ATMs, scattered across multiple towns hundreds of miles apart. This made tracking her movements nearly impossible. It was as if she had known exactly how to cover her tracks, slipping through the cracks of a system designed to catch criminals. The money, the very foundation of their future, was disappearing piece by piece, leaving Mark helpless. Mark struggled with the idea that Emily might be gone forever. Every morning he would wake with a flicker of hope, only to have it crushed by the cold reality of her absence. His friends tried to support him, but even they were beginning to doubt if Emily would ever return. Some suggested she had run off willingly. Others whispered darker possibilities. Had she been forced? Had she made a terrible mistake? But no one had any answers. In an effort to find any hint of where she might be, Mark's private investigators scoured social media and online platforms. One day they uncovered a hidden social media profile Emily had been using in secret. The account was carefully disguised under a different name, with photos of places she had never mentioned visiting. There were snapshots of busy city streets, coffee shops, and airplanes, hinting at a life far removed from the quiet town they had planned to leave behind together. Even more curious were the messages Emily exchanged with unknown contacts, some friendly, others tense and hurried. It was clear she was communicating with people who were not part of her usual circle, and some messages hinted at stress and urgency. The content was cryptic, filled with hints, but no clear explanation. Emily had been leading a double life, one Mark never suspected. The discovery of this secret online world shifted the investigation into new territory. Had Emily been hiding debts, problems, or even danger from Mark? The woman he thought he knew was suddenly a stranger. But tracing these online leads proved difficult. The accounts were frequently deleted and recreated, and IP addresses led nowhere definitive. Every time investigators thought they were closing in, the trail evaporated. Mark grew increasingly desperate. He traveled to cities where Emily's social media suggested she had been, speaking to locals, checking hotel records, and visiting the places in her photos. Each visit deepened the mystery. People who might have seen her either didn't remember or were unwilling to share information. She was a ghost, always one step ahead, slipping through the cracks of the world they had hoped to start anew in. Despite the isolation, Mark refused to give up. He posted flyers, set up websites, and held local meetings, hoping someone, anyone, would come forward with information. The emotional toll was immense. Nights were filled with restless thoughts, and days dragged on in an endless loop of waiting and hoping. The dream of a new life was now overshadowed by an overwhelming sense of loss and confusion. What troubled Mark most was the growing realization that Emily's disappearance was not just about the stolen money or a sudden flight. It was about secrets she had carried for months, perhaps years, hidden beneath the surface of their shared life. The calm woman who had promised a fresh start had been living a double existence, and whatever she was running from had now pulled her into a dangerous and unknown world. As the weeks stretched on, the story became less about escape and more about mystery. Where was Emily? Why had she taken everything and vanished? And would Mark ever find out the truth behind the woman who had once been his partner, his hope, and now his greatest enigma? The questions haunted him, and with no answers in sight, the trail grew colder by the day. Months after Emily's disappearance, a surprising break in the case brought a glimmer of hope to Mark and everyone following the story. A waitress at a cafe in a quiet coastal town recognized a woman who looked remarkably like Emily. The waitress had seen a news report about the disappearance and was convinced the woman she served was the missing person. The woman worked under a different name, keeping a low profile, and had only recently started at the cafe. This sighting was unexpected and promising, but when the authorities arrived, Emily had vanished once again, leaving behind only a hastily scrawled note with just 3 words: "I needed to live." The note offered little comfort, yet it revealed a glimpse into Emily's state of mind. It suggested she had been running not only from her past but also from a life she could no longer bear. Her disappearance was not merely an act of betrayal or escape, but something deeper, an act of survival. This revelation changed the way the investigation was viewed, shifting it from a straightforward missing person case to something more complicated and tragic. Further inquiries unearthed details that had been hidden beneath the surface. Emily had accumulated secret debts that she never shared with Mark. These were not the small, manageable kind, but serious financial troubles linked to people with dangerous reputations. Evidence surfaced indicating she had been under pressure from individuals connected to loan sharks and possibly involved in risky dealings. The stakes were far higher than anyone had imagined. It became clear that Emily's disappearance was driven by desperation. She had been trying to protect herself and maybe Mark from the consequences of these debts. Taking the savings was not just a theft. It was a desperate bid to buy freedom and safety. The money wasn't just gone. It was a lifeline, a means to escape a world that had become too dangerous to face. Mark struggled to reconcile this new picture of Emily with the woman he had known. The loving, hopeful partner who dreamed of a fresh start was also a woman hiding secrets and fears so intense that running away seemed like the only option. The community that once supported them now grappled with a more complex reality, one of hidden pain, fear, and survival, rather than simple betrayal. As investigators pieced together the puzzle, they discovered that Emily had been in contact with people who had promised her safety if she disappeared. There were reports of a safe house in a distant city, a place where people could disappear and start over under new identities. It was likely that Emily had planned her escape carefully, hoping to find protection far away from the threats that haunted her. Despite the grim circumstances, there was a small measure of hope. Emily's actions, while painful and confusing, suggested she was alive and fighting to reclaim control over her life. The question remained: how long could she stay hidden? And what kind of future awaited a woman running from shadows so dark and dangerous? Mark's world was forever altered by these revelations. His hope for a simple reunion was replaced by the harsh understanding that Emily's life had become a tangled web of fear and survival. His search continued, now fueled not just by love and loss but by a desire to understand the woman he once thought he knew so well. The story took on new urgency. It was no longer just about finding Emily. It was about uncovering the hidden dangers she faced and the sacrifices she made to escape them. Mark held on to the hope that someday, somehow, their paths would cross again, and that the truth behind Emily's disappearance would finally come to light. But for now, the mystery deepened, and the shadows grew longer. Years have passed since Emily vanished, and her story remains unfinished, an open chapter marked by absence and unanswered questions. Mark's life has been shaped by the void she left behind, a silence heavier than any words. The dream they built together was shattered, replaced by a haunting mystery that refuses to fade. Mark has continued his search, despite the toll it has taken on him. He has tracked down every possible lead, traveled to distant cities, and spoken to countless strangers. Some have seen glimpses of a woman matching Emily's description. Others have only offered dead ends. The money she took remains untraceable, spent in ways designed to erase her trail completely. Law enforcement agencies occasionally revive the case, hoping for new evidence, but each time it feels like chasing shadows. The community that once watched Mark and Emily prepare for their new life has moved on. Some remember Emily with sympathy, others with suspicion, and a few with bitterness. The story became a cautionary tale about trust, about secrets hidden beneath the surface, about dreams shattered by betrayal. But for Mark, it is far more personal. It is a wound that refuses to heal. Despite everything, Mark has never stopped hoping. Hope is both his driving force and his heaviest burden. He clings to the possibility that Emily is out there somewhere, alive, perhaps scared, but still holding on to a chance at a fresh start. The knowledge that she took their savings not out of greed, but desperation, complicates his feelings. It challenges him to see her not as a villain, but as a woman caught in circumstances too dark and dangerous to face. Mark's search has also led him to question everything he thought he knew about their life together. The secrets Emily kept, the debts she hid, the people she feared, they all painted a picture far more complex than the hopeful couple planning a new beginning. It forced him to confront the uncomfortable truth that people can carry entire worlds of pain and fear inside them, invisible to even those closest. There are nights when Mark wonders if he will ever truly know what happened to Emily. Will she return? Or is she gone forever? A ghost slipping through the cracks of a world too vast and complicated to hold her. He fears that some stories do not have neat endings, that some disappearances remain mysteries forever. Still, the story remains alive, retold by those who remember, studied by those who seek to understand, and felt deeply by those left behind. It is a reminder that the path to a new life is not always clear, that hope can be fragile, and that sometimes the greatest mysteries lie not in what happens to people but why. In the end, Mark's search is about more than finding Emily. It is about facing loss, embracing uncertainty, and holding on to hope even when the future is unknown. It is about the powerful and painful truth that some dreams end not with a new beginning, but with a silence that echoes for years to come. And as the sun sets on the small town they left behind, the question lingers: will Emily ever be found? Or will she remain a shadow on the edge of a dream, forever out of reach, carrying the secrets of a vanished life? The answer remains elusive, locked away in the silence of the years.